Hello and welcome to our webinar today about special needs planning. Planning for a loved one can be sometimes a very overwhelming process, but with a little bit of help and guidance today, I think we can help to alleviate some of those overwhelming feelings. Our conversation today, our goal today, is just to give you the basics of some of the items that you'll need for special needs planning. This is not going to be all inclusive, and if anything, it's just intro to some of the tools and the practices that you're going to need to have. This is especially important to me. I have a Down syndrome sister-in-law, and so some of the things we've talked about today we've used in our own family. But I hope you can use some of these tools and guidance to help you or a loved one or maybe a friend that you know. Here at Wild Wealth, I'm a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, and this is a big passion of ours around planning for the future, especially for those loved ones that can't plan for themselves. We've had some incredibly growth here at Wild Wealth. So whether you're in Scottsdale or Glendale or Tempe or in Payson, I want you to take the things that you hear today and bounce those off of your local advisor. And he can definitely help to guide you through the steps we talked about today, and then also refer you to some professionals that can help you out in some of these areas. I think that one of the things that I want to start the conversation off by saying is that many times we get overwhelmed when we start to have a loved one in our life that needs planning. And frankly, you're not alone. There's some statistics out there that say that 13% of all Americans have a disability. It's interesting that 10% of those are adults with special needs. So 1 out of 10 is pretty some significant numbers. CDC came out and said that, and this number was staggering to me, is 1 in 59 kids have autism. But more importantly, especially in some of the clients that I have starting to experience, is 1 in 10 older Americans are starting to have some Alzheimer's dementia issues come up. And so we're going to start seeing this more and more in our lives and in the people we meet. And so it's important for us to have some of the right planning tools to help out each other. So what is special needs planning? It's important that as we talk about this process of planning, it really comes down to two sides of this. One is the financial, and the other side is the well-being. It's really matching the current needs of that person with the future needs. And so this can be done for somebody, a child, a sibling, sometimes even yourself, or maybe even a spouse. So as I mentioned before, it's important for us to look at that this idea of balancing this need of your future need and your present need really is in 3 different areas. 1 is the personal care of that person. Number 2 is the financial, and then 3 is the legal to back that up. And so when we look at this, it's important for us to not only create those plans, but also to communicate those plans to the important people, and then also to review and monitor those plans to make sure that there aren't some changes or some additions or subtractions that need to go into that. And then lastly, to ensure that the family members have been adequately addressed, and to make sure that we're going through and we're making sure that we didn't miss anything in that process. It's unfortunate when we do run into people that haven't done the right planning. There are some major consequences of that. One is that if you don't do it, then the court is going to have to step in and assign somebody to do that on your behalf. And frankly, that might not have been the person that you would have chosen to take care of your loved one. The second thing is, many times, if you're not choosing the resources and finances for your loved one, then the court's going to decide. And frankly, that might not be the number that you would have picked out. And then also, on the flip side of that, is that maybe the court will be spending assets that you would not have attended for that. And in some cases, the individual, if we don't do our financial planning correctly, could run out of money. And so it's important for us to go through this process and do it the right way. Okay, so let's talk about the process or and the planning steps or the areas that we need to focus on. Number one, we need to create and implement a current personal care for that loved one. Number two is that we need to create a transition plan in case that first plan doesn't work out. Maybe you pass away or there's been changes that need to happen. So we need to have a transition plan to take care of some of those personal care items that were discussed. And we'll get into these as we go forward. Number three is that we need to create a legal plan to be able to execute some of the plans and the wishes that you have. And lastly, the financial plan. We need to make sure that we properly fund this to execute some of these desires and goals that you have for your loved ones. All right. So first question is who's going to care? Who's going to provide the care? In many cases, it's in most families, and mine is a family member that helps in, and we have other family members that helps in and subsidizes that care. In some cases, you're going to have some full-time or part-time professionals to help out. Maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's some other type of professional help, but you'll need to have that and think about who's going to offer that care. Lastly, where will your loved one live? Will it be at a home, or is that person able to live independently? If they can't live independently, maybe they have to live with a family member or a friend, or in some cases, an assisted living facility. Next, you have to think about what care is needed when you're starting to design this personal care plan. And I think about some of the basics, like the first one is grocery shopping, right? Is that person going to be able to go grocery shop? Is that person going to be able to provide and pay their monthly bills? The next one is washing and dressing. Is that person able to dress themselves and provide that level of self-support? Next, preparing meals. Will they be able to prepare their own meals, or are you going to have to maybe have that food delivered to them? Next is transportation. Can they transport themselves or public transportation, or maybe you'll need in the personal care plan, maybe you'll have to think about having other type of transportation set up from a guardian. Next is their medical care. Are they able to give their own medications? Are they able to self-administer those, or do you have to have somebody in place to do that? And then lastly, when it comes to the personal safety, do they need is there items in place like a ramp or changes to their home that need to have to be addressed? These 6 areas, I think, are some great ways for you to start thinking about and designing their personal care plan. Next is if you're not in that place to provide those areas, how can those original wishes be carried out, first of all? And then how do you continue those cares and those, or maybe the supervision of those cares when you're not around and in a place to do it yourself? Next is that when we look at this, it's important for you to, and this is special important in our life, is to kind of anticipate the what ifs, right? To anticipate and to be prepared for maybe some of the situations that you may not have thought about. And so this is where bringing in some support care is a great resource for you to help you think about maybe some things that you haven't thought about. So as you can see, one of those is that if you die or if in our situation, it wasn't necessarily death. It was the person just isn't in a position to take care of that person anymore. And so you're going to have to be able to have systems in place in this transition plan to make sure that we think about those situations. All right. Next is we need to create a legal plan to ensure that all these wishes are put in place. And so the first one is a medical directive. All right, is making sure that your doctor and their staff knows what you and the patient's wishes are beforehand. Number 2 is a durable power of attorney. So having yourself or having other people being able to speak on their behalf. Number three is your last will and testament. This is an important one because many times this will be the main document that you're able to express legally your wishes and how you want that carried out. Next, I think it is ideal for you to be able to just put your ideas and your wishes in a regular language format, just a simple letter of instruction of what your wishes are. Now, this isn't a legal binding document, but it's really important for you to maybe put some of these ideas and some wishes in place so that people know your perspective on how you like it to be handled. Now, I think it's important. It's vital that you at this point you start to bring in some experts to take your wishes and you start to have an attorney to put those into some formal documents. This is one of those areas that you just probably shouldn't skimp on. It's that vital for you to go through and have it done the right way. My father just passed away, and I got to tell you, having the proper legal documents in place, we had a trust drawn up way before we needed it. And for us to walk in and have that document done the right way, what a blessing that was for our family. Next is that you do need to have a financial game plan in place. It's important the way that when we do some special needs planning, it's very similar to planning for somebody's retirement. The first thing we do is we analyze, well, what is the monthly cost going to be for the individual? And number two is we try to inflate that all the way up throughout retirement and try to add that up. And then lastly, and this is important, especially in today's age, is to not forget about inflation. Several years ago, they said 2% is perfectly realistic. And we're seeing today that we're heading back to the long-term averages of 3.6%. And so that's important for us to think about. So once that you have that financial goal in mind of what you need to protect for, there's some different ways that you can think about how to pay for it. First one is insurances. When you think about insurances, they're a great way to offset some of that cost. Maybe it's the health insurance, it's the disability insurance, the life insurance that you have in your family. It's a great way to fund some of your financial goals. Many times, and then through ourselves and estate planner, we can set this life insurance up so that it's even a tax-free for your loved ones. All right, so the next one is is throughout your last will and testament. Many times these assets, it'll be important for you to think about how you want these assets to be distributed to your beneficiaries. And the reason why is because in many cases, you'll want to be sure to not overstep any type of government benefits that you have in place. Some of these benefits are needs-based, and so you want to make sure that you do it the right way. So let's talk about some sources of government funding. Some of those are national organizations. I had one client with some cancers, and he has his cost of insurance is $12,000 a year, and there's two charities out there that offset at $12,000 a month is his medications. And so there are some national organizations out there that help out and pay for his medicines. Another one is some community aids, some state aids, and some national federal aid. Let's talk about some federal aids. The first one is Medicare. The Medicare is not needs-based. The other one is Social Security. Yeah, the Medicare is usually 65. But with that said, there are some other benefits, like some education benefits. I would encourage you to research them all and to really get in there. Okay, and then some of our federal benefits are needs-based. One of those is Medicaid. Medicaid is usually for somebody that have low income or very limited resources, and it usually helps to pay for long-term care or nursing home or some medical or some medication costs associated with that. Another type of needs-based asset is SSI. Usually it's for people that are 65 and older. We think about this as somebody that's retired or disabled. But in many times, in some cases, people can get Social Security benefits even if they never even paid in to Social Security. Okay, so let's talk about some type of techniques that we can start to use around special needs. Special needs planning, if you have resources, some of the government resources that we have, it's important to know that this, in some families, in some cases, this is the only resources they have is the government programs. But with proper planning, if your family does have some assets, they may be able to, if you do proper planning, you may be able to still take advantage of some of these federal programs, regardless of how much assets you have. But it all comes down to having some of the proper planning in place. Many times, some of these family resources has to be used for non-basic needs, or in some cases, like a secondary or supporting assets is how these assets are structured. Probably one of the best tools out there in special needs planning is called a Supplemental Needs Trust. They're called S&Ts. They were given some legal backing back in the early 90s, and because of that, today this is one of the best tools that we have available to us. If they're properly drafted and administered, they would not be counted as available assets, and consequently, they won't be counted as income for that individual. It's important that we think about when we have these assets that there are some costs associated with it, and expenses maintaining those trusts the right way. There's three types of trust or S&Ts. One is self-settled or first-party S&Ts. Number two is pooled S&Ts, and number three is basically just third-party S&Ts. And so we're going to go through and look at these in detail. The first one is a self-funded or self-settled S&T. And other people call it first-party S&T. The point is that it has to be for the sole benefit of that person with disability, number one. Number two is that they have to be under 65 at the time the trust was created. What's nice about these is that they can be created by a parent, by a guardian, by a grandparent even. And so that's a nice feature. Another feature of this is that when you have these assets, they don't have the same look-back provisions as other Medicaid or SSI benefits. And so the look-back provision usually has about a 60-month look-back. So if you transferred assets into something to try to get assets out of your state within the last 60 months, then you wouldn't qualify. This, when you transfer these assets in there, it doesn't qualify for that look-back provision. And so that's a really nice benefit. The assets in this trust, when you try to apply for some of those benefits, it won't count as eligible for those purposes. And then number two, the income also doesn't have a direct hit to you. The way that they get around this is that after that person dies, the assets go back to Medicaid and the government to try to reimburse the government for the cost that they incurred. And so I guess that's a fair deal from that standpoint. The next one is a pooled S&T. What happens, some charities, what they do is to provide scalability and flexibility. They'll pool the assets of several S&Ts together, and then they'll have sub-accounts for each disabled person. And so what's nice about this is that you have the sub-account for that person, but in some states, the assets don't have to go back to the state. They can go on back to the pool for other disabled persons, but it really depends on the state that you live in and the state laws for those pooled accounts. The final one is third party. Now, third party, it's created by a parent or an individual, and once again, there's no payback requirements in these cases. But one of the problems here is that if these are not drafted correctly, it could trigger some of those ineligibility standards that we talked about before. So it's important that this is these special needs trusts are drafted correctly. Okay, so ABLE accounts. Some of you may have heard of ABLE accounts before, some of you may not have. ABLE accounts are really some tax advantage vehicles, pretty similar to a college 529 savings account. These accounts, they're really available to individuals whose disability began before age 26, and they can really be used towards a lot of the qualified expenses that disability person would have. Now, they don't generally count towards the personal asset limit for Social Security or Medicaid. Each state has their own programs. Usually you can only have one account per person, and they do have some lifetime contributions. I believe it's $350,000. You can contribute up to the gift tax exclusion, which for 2021 is $15,000. And so usually if it's over $100,000 in the account, then you're going to have some of those, you're going to spend that account down to $100,000 or below before you start to qualify for some of the federal benefits. But with that said, it can be a terrific vehicle to be used. Now, one of the drawbacks in this ABLE account is that if you've incurred some expenses from Medicare, they may claw back those assets to reimburse Medicaid and reimburse the government, and then so that's one of the drawbacks from this account. So we talked about the SNTs, we talked about the ABLE accounts, two great vehicle choices, and in some cases you use both of those to meet some of the family needs. I think that it's important that you try to evaluate all these. I think that sometimes some people they have some big concerns about how do I meet the personal needs and the financial needs of that person, and at the same time, how do I prepare for my own future? And so I would encourage you to, if you have those questions, to reach out to us and to talk to us about how other people in your current situation have handled some of this. And so we've got some great strategies and some great techniques to help you out with that. Once again, thanks for logging in today and to listen in. Once again, this is intended just to be the very basics, the very introduction of some of the things that you'll want to be considering. And so we look forward to having those conversations with you and being a part of this journey with you. Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.